Hello and a very good afternoon to all of those joining me live on the Facebook page of News 9. I'm Neha. Now, Supreme Court on Wednesday came down heavily on police, asking them to take the right approach and not harass people unnecessarily. To put it in context, the Supreme Court asked police not to summon people from across over social media posts criticizing governments. The Supreme Court said, and I quote, "We cannot have citizens hauled from one corner of the country to another for a social media post criticizing the government." What triggered Supreme Court was Bengal police, who issued summons to a resident in Delhi. The person in question spoke critical of the West Bengal government over not implementing lockdown norms effectively. The Supreme Court very explicitly stated, "We are here to protect free speech and let India remain a free country." Supreme Court, while highlighting a case study, also made it clear that summoning someone from Delhi to Kolkata is sheer harassment. The bench said, and I quote, "We as the Supreme Court are here to protect free speech. The reason why the Supreme Court was created by the Constitution is to ensure that ordinary citizens are not harassed by the state." Now, to speak about this controversy in depth, joining me over the phone line is Supreme Court lawyer Mr. K.V. Dhananjay. Many thanks, sir, for speaking to us. My first question to you, Mr. Dhananjay, would be, we don't have any such law which states that you cannot be critical of the government. Now, what we see as perhaps a growing trend is that people are being summoned from faraway places just because they criticize the government. What do you make of it?
Well, I think it's disastrous because democracy is nothing if people don't have the right to criticize whom they have voted for. So I think we've in fact digressed so much over the last 30, 40 years. The question naturally arises, why do we even have such stupid laws, like for instance the law of sedition? Now what is sedition? Unfortunately, this law was, when the British came out with this law, it was like they were one ruling authority. We never had anything like an election. So you had to endure them and you had to put up with them. And that's why they said anybody who tries to create disaffection so far as the government is concerned, will be committing sedition, and there's punishment, there's graded punishment for that. But that has no place in a democracy where people vote out their government, or for that matter, elect every 5 years, because unless you create disaffection. Now, what's the meaning of disaffection? Disaffection means there's a certain degree of outrage in the people about the government, about its policies. So it's a misfortune that we've retained that law, and look at what's happening. You will find instance of that almost every day in the country. Some chief minister is unhappy with his cartoon, and some journalist or some artist would do something like that, and then the chief minister would direct his police force to go and arrest him. Mm-hmm. And here again, in this case, the one which got the attention of the Supreme Court was the one concerning how West Bengal. Obviously, West Bengal is not handling the COVID pandemic well, and then. During these festivals, it was expected there will be a bigger congregation, and it's only natural that anybody would want that to be well managed. So in that context, if somebody were to criticize the government, it's no business of the police to summon someone all the way from Delhi. And the fact that the police, in fact, want to even do that would show that they're not really acting to uphold law and order. They're just doing it like a political thing, and that's bad. And that's like politicizing the police. So I think we've reached a tipping point where I think the Supreme Court will have to take these matters so very seriously, and then identify that no amount of judgments over how this law should be interpreted is going to help the people. Right. The police across the country will always be misusing it.
Right. Mr. Dhananjay, in this case, we're having a case against a person who's saying COVID situation wasn't handled properly. Now, would you elaborate on what basis on what base are such cases really registered?
Well, like I just said, criticizing the government, all said and done, is not made an offense, because no democracy can afford to make such a thing as an offense. But because we followed the British pattern, there are so many laws that were made by the British to clamp down on nationalist movement and then the movement for freedom struggle, disaffection, like for instance sedition. Now that was a provision under which Mahatma Gandhi was jailed, for more than 6.5 years at different points of time. That is the very law that we have continued. Now, obviously, after the Constitution of India came into effect on 26th of January 1950, there were several people that went to the Supreme Court and to their state high courts, and they said, look, we can't have this law of 124, which is sedition, because we now have an elected government, and if you don't create disaffection amongst the electorate, they're not going to vote out. So every time there's an election and the opposition canvasses against the government, they are obviously creating disaffection.
Right.
At which point the Supreme Court said, well, what we will do is we will read something more into that law, which is we will say that disaffection itself is not going to be an offense. Any disaffection which in fact, motivates somebody to take up arms against the government, that will be an offense. So that's what the Supreme Court said. But then again, you see, in this particular West Bengal issue, it was not like whoever put that post was exhorting people to commit violence against the police or the government. So there was no basis for the police to have acted. And that's the difficulty. You see, because the law is so broadly worded, anybody could be booked under it. And I can tell you, if media people, if you have not been booked, if I have not been booked, that's largely because we've been lucky.
All right, Mr. Dhananjay, isn't it high time for India to bring better cyber security laws to deal with this sort of situation in a more efficient manner? And, our data protection bill, for that matter, is still a bill. Shouldn't it become a law? Isn't this the need of the hour?
Very true. The data protection bill, what it does is, because we are sharing our personal information online, it is meant to make sure that those who want to store personal information will do so with a great deal of care and security. Like for instance, if I am logging onto Amazon very often and I store my credit card information there, then Amazon would be required under these laws to make sure that nobody would hack its server and then obtain my information and then misuse that information. I mean, that's just one example. Data protection law is in fact more encompassing. Even personal information is also involved therein. But very often, for the police to basically go back to Twitter and say that, look, here is this person who's put up this post, and we have some information about that person based on what information has been publicly shared by that individual. We want more information about that individual, so give us that information. Now, for the police to ask such kind of information from the, let's say, service providers or, servers, we will need more enhancements in the data protection bill that we currently have. So what we currently have is not even sufficient for that purpose. So it's important that we start looking at, shielding users of, a post. People who put up posts or users again from harassment from the police by the police contacting the data providers and then getting information from them. So that's the way I think that's the way forward. So we have a lot of work to do in that regard.
Absolutely. There's no denying that. Thank you very much, Mr. Dhananjay, for joining us with all of those important insights. Well, of course, it remains to be seen if the cops are more sensitized in such matter. And remember, while online, it's always better to know your rights. Many thanks for watching. If at all you like this video, do not forget to subscribe News9 YouTube. Like us on News9 Instagram, Facebook, as well as Twitter. Stay safe. Keep those masks on.